Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. We're here tonight with Joann Brinton, and Joann's running for the school board, District 15.
Yes.
You're from St. George?
I've been in St. George for 12 years. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Live in St. George, Utah.
So let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
Where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, right on the border of Mexico, Brownsville. Brownsville, Texas, for the first 16 years of my life.
That's why you have that, I call it god-awful orange, but it's okay. It's the Texas orange. Of course, I went to Texas A&M, so I have to say that. I'm obligated.
I'm a Longhorn fan. I grew up watching games with my grandfather burning an orange candle and his Great Dane dressed in jockstrap and Texas gear.
Oh, really?
The children were not to talk during the games. It was very serious business when Texas played.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so that was the choice. That is the choice of color, right?
It is. It's my favorite color. It just makes me feel close to my family and my roots down in Texas. And the whole time I was at BYU, I kept a Longhorn decal on my car.
Oh, that's cool. So you did go to BYU to school.
I did.
And so what did you study there?
I studied history teaching at BYU.
Oh.
Yeah.
So have you been a history teacher then?
I have. I've been a history teacher. I taught a little bit of second grade on a waiver at a charter school the first couple of years, and then switched to a new charter school that was opening up in Spanish Fork, and I helped create the history curriculum and taught U.S. history there for a few years.
And so they actually taught U.S. history back then.
They did, yes.
So what from just talking about history, what were the things that you were excited about teaching kids?
Oh, I love the founding of our country. Just the story of this ragtag bunch of, they weren't even soldiers, farmers, ranchers, just people trying to feed their families and live out in the wild and tame the wild, who came together to fight against tyranny and a government across the sea that was oppressive and not giving them representation in the decisions that were being made. And I think there's so many miracles that happened through that, and people coming together with all different, but that they were able to defeat the greatest army in the world.
Yeah.
At the time.
It actually was kind of an amazing story, really.
It's an amazing story. We have an amazing history in our country.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, when he set up the University of Virginia, one of the required readings in the curriculum for civics education was George Washington's final address, which is actually a remarkable statement about our country, and from a remarkable man that left after a few terms, right?
He set that precedent and paved the way so that we wouldn't have tyranny in our country. We wouldn't have somebody that just stayed and became a king. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really a great example, and you can see that Providence was on his side.
Yeah, there's so many amazing stories around his life. And I was in D.C. in September for a conference and loved being at his house on his grounds. I was disappointed in the narrative that's told at his house right now, that each of the places we went to, they did mention that he stepped down. That was the good that they attributed to him. But they didn't mention all the great stories. There was a big focus on him being a slaveholder, and not telling the full story of his life. And we wouldn't have a country if he hadn't. The troops were ready to revolt after not being paid, right? At the end of the Revolutionary War.
Right.
And the address where he steps down his commission as the general, and he has to take put his spectacles on because he can't see the paper, and is able to diffuse the soldiers who are so upset and ready to revolt by saying, "This war has cost me my eyesight." They realized this beloved general that they've all followed through thick and thin and freezing temperatures and starving, not being paid, leaving their families. They realized that it had cost him too, and they backed down. And he was able to rally the Constitutional Convention and unite and sit at the head of that as they fought out and worked out the details of our Constitution and united everyone. I don't think he was such a unique figure that was divinely protected through battles in his early life as a surveyor, and the French and Indian War.
Right.
I think that's the one with the great battle with the Indian chief, that there was
Right.
something in one of your recent posts that talked about that story. That, they watched. I mean, he had 2 horses shot out from under him, bullet holes through his coat, in his hat, and that he wasn't killed.
Well, in that letter, he really talks about his life being spared, right? Mm-hmm. And when I was at his home there with my family, when we were leaving the house, I talked to one of the docents there, and I said, "Hey, where's that painting of Washington next to his horse kneeling down?" Because I remember that painting by Arnold Freeberg. And she goes, "Oh, that thing?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "It's over in the trinket shop." That's the way she put it, right? Yeah. And then she said, "Do you know that never happened?" And I said, "What do you mean that never happened?" "Well, Washington didn't pray." And I thought, oh, this poor lady has never read any of his letters, right?
No.
And doesn't realize that, he was a God-fearing man. He was a deist, right? And so it's interesting how we've changed some of the history, right?
They change the narrative, and they tell this revisionist story that highlights things based on our day and wants to just point out like the slaveholding portion, but leave out these other stories. Thomas Jefferson, the same thing happens with him.
Right.
Where, he's the one that they look to say separation of church and state, how important that is. But he never meant for it to be the way that it is today.
Right.
They just were so concerned that we didn't have one religion in control, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that we weren't sectarian, that's the word, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's been, he studied the Gospels. Jefferson had like 4 different, he studied Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and he had them written in different columns. And so he didn't.
Yeah, they refer to that as the Jefferson Bible, where he actually just, we didn't have word processors, so he basically cut up Bibles and put them together, right?
And he studied, and all the inventions. But if you go to his house today, I haven't been, but I've heard similar stories that they just want to talk about Sally Hemings and link him to,
Yeah, it's sad, especially since at the founding of the country, I mean, you think about the limited and enumerated powers of the federal government and how they left all the other things to the state, right? And so it's really interesting when you actually read the letters that they'd written. I went back and studied Jefferson and all of his correspondence, and you get a different view, right, than you do in the history, in a lot of the history books.
And have you seen the books, The Real Thomas Jefferson, The Real Ben Franklin, and The Real George Washington?
No. What?
So it tells their story in the first half. The National Center for Constitutional Studies put these books together, if I'm remembering right. And then the second half is kind of an encyclopedia of their thoughts and the things that they wrote about. And so you can look it up by subject in the second half of the book and see what they actually said. But I got to study those books, when I was at ALA in the beginning, and I think that was 2005. So it's been a little while since I've read them, but it was really interesting.
So are you still a teacher?
No, I haven't taught. So I taught while I was a single mom. I got married young and left school and got married and had a couple of kids. And then I got divorced and ended up going back to school and finishing my teaching degree. And then I taught as a single mom.
Oh, interesting.
And so I was there from 2005 to 2008 at ALA in Spanish Fork.
Okay.
And then I met my husband, and he was in Salt Lake, and we got married in 2008. And I moved up to Salt Lake and taught at Highland High School my last year and taught government and geography there. And that was such a great experience. I loved Highland.
Oh, very cool.
Had so much fun there. And it really stretched me because in this little charter school in Spanish Fork, kind of had a homogenous, population. They were easy to teach and they soaked it in. But it was a big stretch at Highland to have students from all over the world, like 40 different countries, different languages, refugees. And it was so much fun to teach government and geography there. for one of the teachers who, I think was he in the Coast Guard? And he got called up beginning of October. So I got to take over for the rest of the year for him.
Oh, very good.
And that was really fun.
So when did you go to St. George?
So we moved to St. George 12 years ago.
Okay.
So my husband works from home, and his mother's in St. George. He went to high school there and swore he would never go back after his time at the U.
Uh-huh.
And then he can work from home, and he was missing golf and we were in Woodland Hills for a few years.
Oh.
And anyway, he thought he had a lot of golfing buddies in St. George and wanted to go back and live. And we just love it down there. We've raised our boys down there close to his mom. So
oh, very
it's
good.
been fun.
Hey, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
In Utah, we're not setting our kids up for success by lowering our educational standards. We aren't creating opportunities for children to grow by focusing on everything but the basics. We need a return to ensuring academic excellence is our number one priority. We must raise the bar on education in Utah. I'm Joann Brinton, and this is why I'm running for the state school board. Like you, I'm tired of the noise and I'm tired of the excuses. I want to make sure that our kids are given every chance to win. They deserve nothing less. When you get your ballot, vote for me, Joann Brinton, the Republican nominee for State School Board 15 in Southern Utah. I'm ready to return solid Southern Utah values to our educational system. Southern Utah, I'm running for Utah's State School Board, and I'm running to raise the bar in Utah's education because I'm done with curriculum standards that lower the bar of achievement and an education system no longer interested in teaching our kids how to think, but instead teaching them what to think. Our kids' success begins by making academic excellence our number one priority. By actively listening to parents, taxpayers, and engaged teachers, we make sure our kids and communities succeed. We don't win by lowering standards. We win when we raise the bar. Elect me, and I will work to restore an educational foundation that ensures our future. When your ballot arrives, vote for me, Joann Brinton, the Republican nominee for State School Board 15.
Welcome back to PoliticIt.com. We're here with Joann Brinton, District 15, State School Board.
Yes.
It's really nice to have you. During the break, we were talking a little bit about some of the things you're trying to push. And this idea of going back to the basics, mm-hmm. I mean, when Matt Hymas was on here, we talked about that quite a bit. But I think it's so important, given the scores that we've had out of the students with the COVID learning loss and stuff. We need to get back to reading and writing.
We do.
And math, right?
Yes, reading, writing, arithmetic, science. And could we start teaching children how to think, not what to think? I think a lot of the social issues coming into our classrooms, all the extras are distracting, and they're being put before children way before they're ready. We need to focus on basics, age-appropriate learning, and look at results. And when the results aren't what we would expect, we need to switch gears and not just keep going with the status quo and voting for the same things. I have watched, Utah graduates 9 of 10 students, and they are really proud through Portrait of a Graduate of that, but the proficiency rates are less than half in the subjects. And so the rates of Math 900 in universities, for example, have grown so much where students are needing remedial math skills before they can go on.
And these are students that go to university.
They've just graduated from high school. They should not, we need to look at the results.
Yeah.
And
well, I've always said if people really believed in equity, then they would give kids a good education.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that's going to hold back somebody more than not being able to read.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, if you can't read, I mean, you spend the first 3 years in school, 3 or 4 years, right, before third grade, mm-hmm. you learn to read. Mm-hmm. And then you read to learn, right? And if kids don't get that point,
that foundation,
then they really are handicapped in terms of learning.
And I sense that from most of the teachers that I've spoken to, and from being a parent now with my second set of children, I've been able to just be a volunteer in the classrooms, do some subbing for their teachers, help with reading assessments and things through their elementary school years especially. I mean, I just sense that the teachers, so much more is being placed on the teachers that distracts from the actual academics, extra tests, extra surveys, extra trainings, social, emotional learning that's taking away from the academics, that the schools, I just think we've got to get back to the basics.
Well, we need to leave the teachers to do what they were trained to do, and that's
what they love,
to teach.
The subjects they love. Most teachers that I know go into it because they just want to teach.
Yeah, they're not trained as social psychologists.
No, they're not.
And you know, we need to get back, I think, like you were saying, back to the basics.
Yeah.
Right.
And as I've been studying the board, one of the most frustrating things, we've got a 15-member board, and as I've watched, the legislature has been more conservative, and they are the ones responding to parents and passing lots and lots of education bills. How many was it I think it was over 130 education bills this last session. They're responding to the parents because the state school board is not. So it was made partisan 4 years ago. We have 2 Democrats and we have 13 Republicans on the state school board. And I'm still, as I'm looking at the votes, which are very hard to find, you have to watch their videos. They're not posted. And so you have to get screenshots and watch the videos. But we're not getting a conservative majority of 8 to push back. It is Salt Lake values, big education agendas that are taking that majority 8 vote on all the issues. And so then the legislature steps in.
Well, and one of the things you mentioned during break was that you said, we've got to get away from Salt Lake values and back to Southern Utah values.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's really one of the main things I'm running on, because I've been watching specifically my board members vote and studying and finding that. And our vote goes with Salt Lake. There is no pushing back. And that's concerning to me because we're one of the most, if not the most conservative area in the state. And I think it's important to listen to everybody, talk to everybody, not have emotional responses to things. And as a board member, I do not see myself, I'm not the kind of person that's going to go on social media and call out board members, but we should have a vote that represents our values, and we do not right now.
Yeah. Well, I like to say that Joe Biden and the Democrats have gone so far left, they've left our children.
Yes.
And, in fact, they've left our children, they've left our families, and they've left sanity.
Yeah. Well, and I heard the man that's running for prime minister against Justin Trudeau, I heard him in a speech a couple months ago, and he said the left used to fight for liberty, and the right was about preserving liberty. But we had this common sense belief in liberty that bound the two together so they could work through things. They just had different ways of going about it. But now what I'm seeing with the left and the agendas are silencing of opinions, canceling, and canceling goes both ways.
Right.
I'm concerned about the canceling on both sides of the extreme, where if you don't agree 100%, you're just bashed and called out online. That's not bringing anybody to the table to solve problems, right? You can't do that in the legislature and get policy.
Well, the term liberal actually comes out of liberty, right?
But it's government tyranny now.
But this is, and it's a progressive agenda. Mm-hmm. It's really not the classical liberal agenda. Right. It's a progressive agenda that wants to kind of remake our country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's concerning. And I think there's such a focus. When I look at the UEA website and the NEA website that have not as much sway in Utah as other places, but they're still a very powerful entity. There's so much push on activism, whether it's climate change, racial activism, LGBT, different rights. Like, can we get back to our schools being a safe place for everyone where we follow the golden rule? Yeah. And Martin Luther King's original dreams, right? Content of character, be colorblind, be race blind, be sex blind. School should just be a safe place for everyone, where every student has a safe place to learn. And merit-based learning, equal opportunities is what America is based on, not equal outcomes that are forced.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are really important issues, and I think people in Utah are actually coming around to that, right? During COVID, it seems that parents actually figured out what was going on in schools.
Yeah, people were watching, and they were seeing the online learning, and I feel grateful to have had my kids in Washington County School District. I think they really try to lead out on things, and they have a stronger voice. And I just think we deserve a state school board member who will reflect that on the state school board.
Well, and I've gotten a lot of flack over the opportunity fits, right?
The Fits-All Scholarship.
Yeah, the Fits-All Scholarship. And, in fact, the UEA just filed a lawsuit against us, right, for passing that. But what people don't realize is that 98% of those scholarships, we only had 10,000 scholarships. We had 27,000 applicants.
Wow.
And 98% of the applicants were from families below the poverty level. They qualified for school lunch.
Wow.
And so that's where and people weren't checking their kids out of school because we have bad teachers. They're checking them out because they're tired of this social agenda that's not moving their kids forward.
Yeah. And I've had former teachers, even in Washington County, come and say, I had to get rid of my history program. I had to get rid of my vocabulary program because of the extra programs coming in, and they're concerned about it. I think teachers have a lot of burnout, and we should free our teachers to teach the subjects they love and get back to promoting excellence in education.
Yeah. So what are you hearing from constituents? I mean, I know you've been out among the people a lot.
Yeah, I've had really good feedback. I mean, I got 85% of the delegate vote at convention. I spent 2 months campaigning to the delegates, and that was an honor and a humbling process. But I feel like my message resonates of just getting back to basics, teaching full history, not one-sided, not leaving out slavery. Of course, we need to look at everything in our history. But the way that history is being portrayed now, if we've got students who are graduating feeling guilty for being white and feeling like they have something to apologize for things that happened 200 years ago, or if we're not teaching about George Washington because he was a slaveholder and we're leaving out all the amazing things he did, that's not teaching history, really.
Yeah. Why is the U.S. different, right? Why have we been the shining city on the hill, right? What happened to that narrative from Ronald Reagan, really, right?
And we have students graduating thinking that socialism's the answer. And it's not. They're not being taught the full history of socialism. It's never worked in any country. Venezuela is the latest example.
Yeah. There you had the wealthiest country, right? And within a generation, totally destroyed.
Yeah, and I just got to go to a campaign event out in Blanding because my district goes from Washington County all the way out to San Juan. It's 6 counties. And listen to them talk about how San Juan County used to be the second most economically strong county in our state, right? Until the uranium rights and things came in, and now it's one of the poorest.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what are your plans? What will you do as a state school board member?
So as a state school board member, I'm just excited, and I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I have time and energy to study the issues. I feel like one of my strengths is that I see bigger pictures and I'll ask questions. I think it's really important to have questions asked and answered and look at results and just be a voice of reason to look at results and make some changes that are needed to get us back to basics.
Right.
Yeah.
And back to students learning, right?
Students learning. However we can bring parents into the equation more, not less, in a constructive way, because I think what's best for parents is best for students, and what's best for teachers is it all kind of goes together.
Yeah, parents aren't the enemy. In fact, parents engaged in the education process have the students that do the best.
And as I've looked at the weighted pupil unit, what is spent in the classroom, Salt Lake spends almost double to Washington County, and yet our rates are better than Salt Lake. So I don't think the money is always the bottom line, right? It's the parental involvement. And I think I think in Washington County, we have more parents that don't have to work two incomes, is what I'm guessing in a lot of our schools that I've seen. A lot of PTA involvement, a lot of just parents helping in the classrooms, running centers for their teachers, grading papers like I was able to do. I think that makes the biggest difference. I think that's a determining factor. When you have strong families, the family is the fundamental unit of society. And a strong family makes for a strong society and better schools and parents caring about education. So, and I know it's a frustration for teachers because there's a lot of parents who aren't as involved. And so I hear, from both teachers who are wanting more parental involvement in a constructive way to help the students.
Yeah, but we don't need parents basically thinking any problem with their students is the teacher's fault.
No,
right?
We don't.
We need to teach kids resilience and we need to teach them discipline, and we need to.
Yes, we do. At one of the charter schools, my first one, Freedom Academy, there was this great program. We were a Love and Logic school, and I got to teach the Love and Logic parenting curriculum, and then the teachers followed it. I loved that because it was accountability, natural consequences, giving children choices and teaching them that their choices matter. I think children rise to that, and everybody wants to make choices. But if you feel like no matter what you do, you're going to get the same grade as somebody who, does twice the work on the project or the same pay in a job, which is what socialism promotes, it kills the desire. And our very first pilgrims in Plymouth tried socialism, and it didn't work, and they were starving to death. Until the Indians stepped in and showed them a better way. And then they started adopting principles of freedom and capitalism. So,
very good.
Yeah.
So we're about out of time.
Okay.
So why don't you just make a pitch?
Okay. Well, I'm Joann Brinton, and I'm running for the state school board in District 15, and I would appreciate your votes. Get your ballots in or make sure and vote on June 25th.
We'll see you guys next.
I'm Joann Brinton, and I'm running for the state school board in District 15. It's time to get back to basics and to promote academic excellence, to empower parents and teachers in the classroom to teach, and to promote Southern Utah values on our state school board. So I ask for your vote on June 25th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Joann Brinton.